We've seen a sharp increase in chronic disease, not only in the US, but throughout the world, country to country, really since the 1950s. And the trend lines are just showing a rapid increase, especially over the last 10 to 15 years. But if we look back in the US, let's look at 1935. When we look at the public health data, this is national health surveys. They showed that 10% of adults were diagnosed with a chronic disease, and children, it was less than 2%. So they think probably 1.5%. Then when we fast forward to the 2000s, it was 45% of adults with a chronic disease. And then in 2020 was an increase to 60% of adults. But probably what concerns me even more, I'm certainly concerned about 60%, of course I am, but the children and adolescents, more than 40% of children are diagnosed with a chronic disease. And the sad reality is, even in the last, what's 2024 now, so within the last 4 years, we have seen even more of an increase. So when I'm talking about chronic conditions, I'm talking about cancer, heart disease, diabetes. We're talking about autoimmune disease. And so what have we seen? A spike of rare and progressive cancers, certainly of autoimmune disease, and heart conditions over the last 3 years. So this situation is bleak. It needs our attention. The systems are not working. The reliance or even the control of the pharmaceutical companies and the modern day diet and the modern day lifestyle are not conducive to a body being healed, to these conditions being reversed. They are putting band-aids on the problem, and for example, the food system, agriculture, and then of course pharmaceuticals, what they are in fact doing is they are fueling the problems. This concerns me too, and when we look at the world IQ over time and what that trend line is doing, we look in, what was it, about 1975, it started declining even more, and we could speculate what that had to do with, but certainly what was in place at those times: industrial food supply, the water supply, vaccinations, pharmaceutical drugs, and so forth. And then we come in 2000s, we come into more like the technology sector and screens and stress and corporate America and so forth. But I look at this and I just can't help but think of the children. And so I've been doing some research on some causative issues here, especially when it comes to children dealing with learning disabilities, ADHD, hyperactivity, and then also mental health issues. This is of huge concern to me. And, my career, my whole adult career has been committed to helping people heal their bodies naturally, to finding solutions to chronic disease and obesity, to helping my clients and patients come off of medications, to reverse those conditions, and to live a life of vibrant and optimal health, to remove interferences, and to live in freedom when it comes to their health. And as I've traveled the world over the last 2.5 to 3 years, or actually even longer than that, but let's say the last 3 to 5 years, it has just become really apparent to me this is not just a United States problem as I've traveled to, certainly Central America, South America, Africa, now living in Europe, lived in Southeast Asia for a little while, as I have clients on multiple continents, and also as I connect with healthcare professionals, whether it be chiropractors, naturopaths, medical doctors, integrative doctors, scientists across the globe. We're really feeling the need to find natural solutions and to fight against the powers that be, whether it be GMOs, medications, vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really time. We know that the cause is the cure. I believe that there are always simple and natural solutions, but the question we always have to ask is why? Because if we don't know why, then I don't believe we're going to have the right solutions. And so I'm going to piggyback on some of Dr. Paul Clayton's work, and he's piggybacking on research from people around the world. He has spent 50 years in global health and in clinical research and product formulation. He's at the forefront of nutritional science. He's a medical pharmacologist and is very active on the global scale, whether it be in the UK, Europe, etc. So he is a renowned research and educator on this. But I'm just going to summarize what he would say is causative for this global crisis that we're having with chronic disease and really just a decline in the human condition. And so those are chronic inflammation. Certainly we know that that's at a forefront cause of chronic disease. Dysbiosis, so that's going to be an imbalance in the microbiome. Nutrient deficiencies, we certainly know that we are overfed and undernourished, and this is one of the problems with obesity. And then metabolic insufficiency. I've spent a lot of my career helping people heal their metabolism, overcome obesity and diabetes and so forth. And so I've always known that this is causative. But if we put these together, we certainly can find anecdotes to these. We can find natural anecdotes and lifestyle anecdotes to these, and if needed, supplemental anecdotes. And I believe when we think about these, when we address these four things, that there will be no need for medication. There will, diagnoses will be reversed, and once again, we can live in freedom of our health. And I believe, certainly my background is microbiology and immunology, and I've done a lot of, my focus, at my educational level was very cellular and metabolic pathways and so forth. And so we are made up of cells, and our cells are foundational. Our cells make up our tissues, which then make up our organs, then make up systems, and then make up our body. And so if we can ensure that our cells are healthy, then that's going to be foundational to healing our body and to our health. And so how do we make sure that our cells are healthy? Well, we have to look at what's protecting the cell and what is allowing transport in and out of the cell, and that is the cell membrane. So if we have a healthy cell membrane, that's in essence, that cell is going to be healthy, and that membrane is going to have a permeability to it. It's going to be fluid. It's going to be soft, and it's going to have healthy transport systems in it. It's going to have healthy components to it. So nutrients can get in and waste products can get out. Why do we need the good nutrients to get in? Well, we have our mitochondria in the cell, which we need for for metabolism, in essence, for energy production. Can't live without ATP. And then we have the nucleus in the cell, which has our DNA, and parts of the DNA need to be activated and inactivated. And, our DNA is also what drives function in our body. And so if that cell is unhealthy, then that cell membrane is going to have impermeability to it. It's going to be more rigid, and it is not going to allow all the nutrients in. So it's going to limit the nutrients in, and it's going to limit the waste products out, which is problematic because that's when the cell becomes autotoxic. That's when that actual cell becomes inflamed, and that is going to affect the DNA. That's going to affect the mitochondria and inflammasomes and things that, other components of the cell. So we want to make sure that we have healthy cells. So if we look at the cell membrane, how do we make sure that we have healthy cell membranes? Well, the cell membrane is a bilayer. It's made of phospholipids. So lipids, meaning fats. It contains different omega fatty acids. And so it has omega-6s in it and omega-3s. So let me just go over to why that is relevant. So if you have, for example, if you have more omega-6s, that's when it becomes a little bit more rigid. And that also affects inflammation in the cell. Now, inflammation is important. Inflammation is a naturally designed process in the body that has purpose. That purpose is to sustain and heal from injury and from trauma. And so an example would be you're stung by a bee, or you're burned, or you cut yourself, or there is a pathogen or a toxin. We need to have this inflammatory response. So that's important. So we need pro-inflammatory cytokines. The problem is when that becomes chronic, when we are continually bombarded with the threats or with the traumas, then the chronic nature of that is what creates this imbalance and disease in our body. So that's the chronic inflammation. So the omega-3s, what do? So it's the yin and the yang. You have the inflammation, but then you need to turn the inflammation off because we don't want it to be chronic. So we need the anti-inflammatory pathway as well. So that's what the EPA and DHA do. They resolve the inflammation. They turn it off. So we need that. Once again, the problem with modern day nutrition and modern day lifestyle is that the inflammation doesn't get turned off, and we don't have enough of, in this example, the omega-3s to do that at a cellular level. So ideally, we are meant to have an even amount of the omega-6s and the omega-3s. It's meant to have a 1-to-1 ratio, so we can get the benefits when we need the inflammation, but we can also turn off. And for someone who's dealing with chronic inflammation, they need to increase the anti-inflammatory pathways to produce, for example, these resolvins and protectants. So we find ourselves in the 2020s to be like we are just literally a globe of imbalance of omega-6s to omega-3. So on my previous webinar, I spoke about the omega-3 index and how the research has shown that is an important measurement when it comes to risk of disease. So now it's a similar number that we're getting here, but we're looking at the 6-to-3 ratio. So when we have too many omega-6s, what happens? How do we see that play out or manifest in our health? We have reduced brain function. The hair quality decreases. For me as a clinician, that is one of my telltales that someone needs more omega-3s and more fats in general. When they notice changes with their hair, we see a reduced heart function, the skin loses elasticity, reduced organ function, and a big one is joint and muscle pain. And then there, other brain symptoms as well, and can even be things with depression, anxiety, and so forth. So why has this happened? Well, the thing is, the body is not producing, for example, the omega-3s. The body can't make it. We rely on our diet for these fatty acids. And so the problem is our diet has changed. In the 1800s and even early 1900s, we had a natural diet. It was literally farm to table. The meats were wild and grass-fed meat. Fish was wild caught. Our meats were not grain-fed, so they were pasture raised. And then we didn't have a lot of grains. Obviously, we didn't have the processed food. So people literally were just eating locally sourced food from the garden, from foraging, before that, and the meats and so forth, and not as many grains. Well, then we look at post 1950. And that's when the processed foods, the seed oils, there was our food supply became industrialized and commercialized. And so now our chickens are fed corn and soy and grains, and our fish is farm raised, and our cattle, they're fattened up. Also, once again, corn, soy, antibiotics, hormones, and so forth. And so we've just literally seen over the last 50, 75 years, our food supply has completely changed. And as that has changed, what has changed, our cell membranes have changed, and the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s has changed in our food supply, therefore has changed in our bodies. And there was this turning point in the 1960s where it flipped to now it's on the side of inflammation when it's a 4-to-1 and above. And it has just literally been increasing. That ratio has been increasing every decade. 15-to-1 now in the US, it is about 25-to-1. And that is why we are just seeing mass amounts of inflammatory diseases. I mean, they're just everywhere around us. We're just dealing with inflammation. And so the company that I'm working with out of basically the Scandinavia area, they have performed with their partner lab in Oslo, they have performed 1.5 million tests worldwide. And so when they're performing these tests, and it's a blood spot test that measures the omega-3 index or the 6-to-1 ratio and the fatty acids. So now just talking about the 6-to-3 ratio, the global average, 97% of those tests are not within range. That's literally we're saying if we're taking that sampling of 1.5 million, and there's more data that also backs this up that I've done. But then we look at North America, 99% of people who take this test are not in range. What does that tell us? As hard as we are working on having a good diet, let's take me, for example, and I don't have my results back yet, but as hard as we are working, we're still not able to meet this omega-3 requirement, whether that be too much omega-6s or not enough of the wild fatty fish, for example. So this we see when it comes to a nutrient deficiency, a global problem that is causative in the chronic disease problem. So we have to know where we are. We certainly, our target is going to be as close to a 1-to-1 as possible, so that healthy range is going to be 3-to-1. And but unfortunately, the average ratio is more of a 15-to-1. And once again, depending what country you're in and depending on your diet, that could be as bad as a 25-to-1 ratio. So I'm so excited that we now have a test that can give us this data. these tests have been available, but people don't know that they're available and they have to go to specialists to get this. And so now this company out of Sweden and then the lab out of Oslo, they have made this test available in 140 countries. So from my viewpoint, there's global access to this now, but once again, people still don't know it. So I feel compelled to do my part to educate on this test and to help as many people as possible have access to this test. Fortunately, when you're not going through, specialists like a cardiology clinic or something, and when you get this as a home test, it can be affordable, it can be easy, and we can get those results back. So I really feel like with my clients, it's putting their health back in their own hands, where they can have targets for their nutrition and their supplementation, and they can feel like they can control those risk factors, and they don't feel like the only option is to do that with a statin drug, or for children, parents to feel like they have to do that with a medication for ADHD, for example. So the potential here is to solve global health issues of things like ADHD. I mean, the research is clear on this. I can share a little bit more of that, but the research shows that this is a simple solution for um, for chronic disease, for anything to do with inflammation, for brain health, heart health, and for cognitive health, mental health, things like ADHD, anxiety, depression, etc. So we have those tests available. You can get those through me. When you do get your testing done through me, I offer my free support as a nutritionist in reading your test and making recommendations based on those test results, whether that be nutrition, supplementation, lifestyle, and choosing the right solutions for your bio-individuality. Those tests are then analyzed by a lab, once again, in Oslo. If you're in the US, the office in Florida collects those results from the home test and they ship them off, and then you get those back. You get those on through an online portal, so you get that direct access to those results and you can track your progress. So a couple of questions here. How do we change the results of that test? Once we have the initial results, how do we meet the goals? And then, so how long does it take and how do we do that? So we can do that within 120 days, which is pretty amazing. And the reason why I say 120 days is because you need the 3 to 4 months to see it's a red blood cell test. So we need that time to see the blood cell turnover, and kind of like an A1C where that tests over 90 days. And so then when you get that A1C result, it's reflecting the last 90 days, but it takes that long to see the cell turnover. And we can bring that balance back. And so in that just 4 months, you can see normalized brain function, better hair quality, heart function, skin elasticity, a healing of the organs, and then improvement with the joints and the muscles. We see amazing results with people that deal with chronic pain and those chronic joint inflammatory conditions. So now we have to see what is the solution to changing these numbers? What helps to what brings balance to the omegas in the cell? And so, the first logical answer is, okay, well, omega-3. So that is correct. If we're looking at the pure food source, it's fatty fish. It's wild fatty fish, because remember, the omega is not directly coming from the fish. It's what the fish eat. So the omega is coming from that microalgae. Okay, but remember, with farm-raised fish, they're not being fed microalgae. Then the fat makeup is going to come from whatever they're being fed. So unfortunately, the omega content, if they are being fed some like fish remnants, it'll come a little bit from that. But really, that's why the wild fish is going to have the higher omega content. So the wild fish is important. The problem with that, there's two problems with that. One, wild fish is not readily available for people, depending on where you are in the world. Just for example, where I live here in Europe, I live on the ocean. However, it's actually not like in the stores. It's not easy to find wild fish. It's all farm raised because that's like this European thing is they believe in this sustainable green food production. And so they farm all their fish. And so that's tough. So accessibility, and it's expensive. It's become very expensive unless you are able to catch your own fish. You live in Alaska or Greenland or somewhere. The other problem is because of the oceans are so contaminated. So now our wild fish is contaminated with mercury and other toxins. So that's a problem. So we can't eat too much fish because of the toxicity. So then the next solution is, okay, well, if we make a fish oil and we purify the toxins out of the fish, yep, that's a great idea. And so that's what they started doing. And this is how the fish oil supplement grew, and this became a solution. And I remember that time, I mean, people still do it, but I remember when everyone was taking a fish oil supplement. The problem is the quality of that fish isn't always good. But the other problem is when they purify it, then while they're purifying the toxins out, unfortunately, it also strips that oil of the antioxidants that are naturally occurring in the fish. And those antioxidants are what are needed to keep the oil stable and keep it from oxidizing. So that oil, without those antioxidants, it oxidizes. And so, that's a problem with shelf life, but it's also a real problem in the body, because when something's oxidizing in your body, then that is causing inflammation, and that affects the arterial walls, and that's not good in your body. We don't want things oxidizing in the body. And so their only solution then is, okay, we've got to put antioxidants back in, but generally they're putting the wrong antioxidants back in. They end up actually putting seed oils in the fish oil. So you look at a lot of your ingredients in the fish oils, there are things in there that are actually inflammatory themselves. So there were a couple of scientists, once again, also out of the Scandinavian countries, that found that the polyphenols from olive oil they were able to serve as the antioxidants to keep this oil stable, to keep the fish oil stable. So that was the solution. So Dr. Paul Clayton, who I referenced earlier, he was able to formulate a supplement with the wild fish oil plus a high polyphenol olive oil, so pre-harvested extra virgin olives, put that together to make what he then called balanced oil. He designed this for his own health and inflammatory condition, and then was selling this in health food stores. But since he partnered with a company that had a global network and a vehicle to distribute it globally, that's when this oil became popular. And that's how I found out about this oil, just recently, and have been doing a lot of research. So that's the solution. Let me just reference a couple of things here, because once again, I think a lot of people will say, okay, my numbers are low, or I know that I need more omegas, or I don't eat fish, for whatever reason, I need an omega. But there are also some other problems with the omega supplements. There's a couple of different research topics. One is the efficacy, and then obviously the stability of the oil. The other is that there has been a link, and once again, and I'm not saying there's an absolute link. This is more of a relative association, but there has been a link with atrial fibrillation and fish oil. Now, I've heard Dr. Paul Clayton speak on this, and he said it's this exact problem. It has to do with these oils being oxidized, the poor quality oils, and that it's just because the industry is missing the polyphenols, which is this olive oil, the olive oil polyphenols. So I just say that because this is one of the reasons why I haven't taken fish oils for many years and why I have not recommended them to my clients. And a lot of times when they're on a fish oil, when they come to me, I end up, I just say, hey, let's just hold off on that supplement while you're working with me. I just have been very skeptical on fish oils myself until I have found this balance oil product. And so they've really cracked the code on this. They have a synergistic formula. It's not even considered a fish oil because it's 60% of the fish oil from the wild caught fish, and then it's 40% of the extra virgin olive oil. So they have a formula that not only like academically makes sense, but they clinically have tested before and after to prove the results. So this truly has been they set themselves apart in the industry, and this is literally the only omega supplement that I can recommend to date. I'm never, just so you know, I'm never attached to a specific brand. I just want good quality products to use myself and for my clients to use. So if there is ever a good quality product, I will advocate for it, recommend it, endorse it, and I do that with several brands. And but I am very particular, the research that I do, and it takes a lot for me to approve of a supplement because I'm just naturally skeptical of supplements, of sourcing, of how they are manufactured, distributed, etc. So this is that balance oil. This is, the makeup. They do have 20 micrograms of vitamin D3 in that. I like their source of their vitamin D. This company is all, it's non-GMO. It checks all the boxes for its ingredients and its sourcing and its purity and so forth. It is it's dosed by weight and age. And so we have, so one, if someone's 150 pounds, I can tell them, look, you're going to be around 10 ml of the oil. And certainly we can look at someone's results and someone's symptomology. So I dose this based on the individual, not just based on a serving size. And so it's really simple. So as I wrap up here, to make sure that we have healthy inflammatory processes in our body, that we have optimal cell health for optimal health. It's four simple steps. Number one, test those cell membranes to see the fatty acid makeup, to see the ratios, and specifically to look for that omega-6 to 3 ratio. The second, once you've taken the test, you can start taking the balance oil. You will just take a small amount every day. Once you've done that for 4 months, you can retest to see the improvement. So 95%, when you are taking the balance oil, 95% of people that retest are in normal range. So that is a significant success rate, significant clinical data. At the same time, you really have to be aware of what you're putting in your mouth. Remove ultra-processed foods, remove seed oils to the best of your ability. But I will say that taking the balance oil, if there are some seed oils that creep in, they combat that. I shared on my previous webinar just the example, if someone has a high omega-3 index, even if they are a smoker, and I'm not advocating smoking, but it actually combats the negative effects of the smoking, of the environmental toxicity or factor there. And why is that? It's because having a healthy cell membrane is protective. It's just that this protects you. So having a proper omega-3 index or a proper ratio is going to protect you if there are seed oils that creep in, because honestly, unfortunately, it's very hard to avoid. But then we test again, and that proves that the strategy is working and how to move forward. So that, simple solution. I love when it's simple. I love when it's cost effective. I love when I want us to eat as well as possible, but I don't think it's realistic to have a perfect diet all the time. And so I love a solution that we can bring in just as a simple daily habit to offset just the little mishaps that happen in our lifestyle. So if you would like more information, please reach out to me directly, Bridget Spurgeon, on all social media platforms, or bridgetspurgeon.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if you would like a link to order your test and your oil and inquire about pricing, I'm just not going to list them here just because they change. And there's been a special on right now. So I just don't want to give information that may change a month down the road. But just reach out to me and inquire for more details.